Hello, everyone, and welcome to Worlds Apart, Words Together, where best friends share laughter, stories, and unbreakable bond. We're still deciding on what to do for the intro. To be completely honest with you, we haven't even thought about it, or at least talked about it, but it's something that we think we should change.
Yeah, it just doesn't quite align with the direction that we've taken the blog. I mean, it kind of defined the reason of starting the blog, but not
Yeah,
really what we've matured it into be in the podcast. Um, but it hasn't really matured with how we've set up the podcast and what we're talking about and stuff we've gone into. So eventually, one day, when we have a little bit more time, we'll sit down and rephrase it
yeah.
to more meet that aim that we are or that we have designed the podcast and the blog around a little bit more. But for now, it is what it is. And
It
today
is
we're
what it
going
is.
to get into our topic of the week. And this one is something we haven't directly talked about, but we have talked about it in roundabout ways in previous podcasts,
Yeah,
which is fine. But this one is very relevant to, or this topic is very relevant to what both of us have kind of gone through a little bit in
and what
taking that.
probably a lot of people our age are going through.
Yeah, because is a another kind of like big change in your life. Like I would say like the first kind of big change of like pre-adult is going or starting college or your first time job if you're not going into college. But generally most people go to college of some type. So it's probably that one. But you go through once you graduate and you get your first time job or you move out and you have your own place, whatever it might be, you go through the secondary phase, kind of like your secondary growth phase. And it comes with similar kind of growing topics, I guess you can say, growing pains. And that's one that we're going to touch on today is knowing your personal limitations. It looks different sort of than, that 18-year-old self. But knowing your personal limitations is so important as you navigate your true early adulthood. You're on your own, you have your job, you're trying to figure out everything you want to be a part of or everything you want to accomplish. But it's also really important that you don't overstretch yourself because then you're not going to be able to do all those things that you set out.
Yeah, so that is a topic that we're going to be discussing today in more depth. Before we do, though, I think it's good to kind of reflect back on last week where we had our guest Georgia. Really enjoyed the conversation with her. It was really lovely to have her on, and we hope that you also liked having her on the podcast. And we're saying this to our one and only follower, Georgia. So hopefully, Georgia, like to be here also. And we just hope to inspire some people. But if you haven't listened to that episode, go back and listen to it. It's episode 44, and it was just a great listen. But yeah, today, a different topic for you guys, and I'm excited to talk about it with you.
Yeah, so I guess the first thing is just understanding what personal limitation really is. And it's different for everyone. It's one of those phrases that changes from person to person, but essentially your personal limitation is a boundary or constraint that one experiences which can impact their ability to take part in activities, both physically, emotional, or psychologically. It's kind of one of those things that if you stretch too far, you will come to a breaking point. And I don't know how I want to say this, but a lot of times you are super eager because it's a new point in your life. You're super eager to take on things and try new things and just try to like take it all in at one time. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, I can't keep up with this and I can't keep up with that and I can't do this and that's like really important to me. And all of a sudden, like everything's kind of crashing down. So it is important to understand what those personal limitations are and to work everything in that you want to within that boundary of what is doable for yourself.
Probably, though, to figure out what that limitation is, you're going to have to cross it at least once. And it's probably going to happen unintentionally
Yes.
because that's what happened. Otherwise, how do you know what your limitation is? It's the same, for example, with drinking alcohol. It's a great example, I think, because when you drink alcohol, I feel like a lot of people going through life go through this phase where they try to drink and they try alcohol, and especially because people around them are drinking, so they join the party. And there's going to be a point where you drink a little bit too much or a lot too much, and you either black out, throw up, pass out, don't matter. But that's how you know that maybe 4 shots was your limitation instead of 6, and that's like you have to cross it unintentionally to figure it out. It's like, okay, I blacked out by 6. Maybe next time I would have to do 5. But then you do 5 and you black out again. It's like, okay, well, probably not. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I think that's also a good example. But speaking also on the alcohol example, when you're reaching that threshold, like, oh, I'm feeling tipsy, like maybe I shouldn't have another drink. And you get the same kind of feeling when you're pushing your personal limitations, because you're like, you get that feeling of high anxiety, or you get that feeling of, I'm not doing what is a priority for me. Like, that's being pushed aside because of all these other things. You get that feeling that you are constantly running around and that you're drained. So I feel like, yes, to a degree, it is something that you may have to cross. And as you said, I agree that it is pretty much unintentional that you do cross to know
yeah,
where that limitation is. But at the same time, I do think that there are some signs that we either A,
totally.
ignore because we like the idea of being that one person that can do everything,
Yeah.
um, that we could pay attention to more to
But that's the
prevent
thing,
that
because some
cross.
people, I'm sorry, I totally
No,
cut
you're
you
fine.
off there. I just had a thought and I had to blur it out. That's the thing, because some people, it's very personality dependent. Some people feel tipsy and are like, I'm good. I don't need another drink. But then there's definitely other personality types that it's like, I feel tipsy, but let's see how more tipsy I can feel.
Yeah,
And
I agree. I think it is based on personality, or just like I said before, like going back to that alcohol scenario, like generally you don't have that brain power to be, oh, I'm kind of feeling tipsy, I should stop. Especially if you're in a group of people. Because if
or
everyone
you're
else is
doing drinking
drinking,
games,
it's hard to
or
say no. And I
yeah,
think the same thing is in this personal limitation that we're trying to discuss, because you're gonna have people be like, oh, do you, whether it's at work, oh, one more project or one more client or one more this. At home, it's like one more, I don't know, like one more meal to cook or one more this, one more that, one more room to clean. Like it manifests itself in different things. But I think we all go through this phase where we want to be that one person, even though we know no one can. But we have this idea that we're young and we're resilient, and we're going to be that one person that can do it all. And I think that's where we kind of get into this like domino effect of we're going to end up crossing it.
well, that, and I also think, let's say you have 6 different projects you're taking on. I don't think you can fully give 100% in every of those projects, because let's take the college example. If you're going through college while trying to and do a sport and be part of the cheerleading team, even though that is a sport, but whatever, and be part of this club and be part of campus life and do this. Like, it's too much. And at some point, you might be able to hold it for like 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, months, I don't know. But there's going to be a turning point where you notice that your efforts in either of the activities, your effort might still be there, but the output is not the same as you want it to be.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I'm gonna I'm gonna give this example because it literally happened last week, end of last week. So my my lab director literally told me and Connor, he's the new person that came in with me, that 90% of our focus should be on lab work, writing, and research, and 10% to everything else.
That's a long silence.
She then amended to say 60% should be on lab work, research, and writing, and 40% should be to everything else. Everything else still includes 100% because it's so complicated. Concepts that we're having to learn are barreling fast and very much in depth. We've been told, oh, only give 10%
It's like, how?
or 40%. No, no, no. There's no way for me personally to grasp those concepts at the rate that I'm expected to by only giving 10 to 40% of my effort. It's not possible. However, for me, it is also not possible to be on two papers, two research studies, sports science activities, and learn those concepts and somehow be able to do them all at my best effort. We're 3 weeks in and I'm feeling it
Yeah.
badly.
Like, in that scenario, like, your effort has got to be like split. And I always like this saying, it's like your 70% is somebody else's 100.
Yeah.
Like, whatever you're giving to the two papers, the concepts, the research, whatever, it might not be your 100%, but it's definitely better than a lot of other people's 100%.
Like personally, like mine,
Yeah.
or like in general.
Well, yours, but also in general, like people that are listening to this, it's like whenever you're feeling overwhelmed, do take a step back and think like, okay, where in what area am I feeling overwhelmed? And is there some way I can make it not as overwhelming for me? Or do I just have to man up and get through this for now?
Yeah. And I give my example for two reasons. One, because it is an example of something that's been placed on me. I didn't have a choice of saying, no, I can only do one paper, or no, like I can only do the study, or like the sports science, or I can't learn these concepts right now. They were all put on me and it has to be done. Like, I don't have a choice to say no. Or I
No.
mean, I guess I do and just fail at my job. But um in theory I don't have. In theory I do have the ability to say no, but in application I do not have the ability to say no.
Yeah.
And that's the reason I bring this up, because a lot of times, going back to your unintentionalness, sometimes, maybe a lot of times, especially in adulthood, your limitation is rapidly approaching or breaking because of what other people are putting on your plate, or what other things are being put on your plate. Not that you're necessarily choosing them.
That doesn't take away the fact, though, that in certain positions you do have the opportunity to say no. It's like people ask you something to do something. It's like, hey, are you interested in doing this? And you might tend to be like, sure, I can take it. But it's like, for my own personal good, do I want to take up another project? Do I really want to try to put effort into this? Like for you, for your example, Leah, it's a little different because it's part of the contract, I guess, where it's just like you have to do all these things for your
Well,
job.
that's what I'm saying. I mean, obviously, it's not the same scenario for every person, but I think it is
No,
important to understand that some positions and some jobs, the choice in theory is there, but again, in application and practicality, it's not
yeah.
really there.
It also depends though if like what kind of job you sign up for because if
Yeah.
you sign up for a job in academia, academias are just it sucks. In theory it sucks. It's just it's a lot of work, a lot of pressure put on you. Whereas if you have another job and they try to add all these things that are not part of your job description, don't let yourself like guilt into doing those things anyways because they
Yeah,
might
for
need
sure.
more hands, sure, but you're not being paid to be those extra hands. So that's where you can set boundaries and limitations for yourself of like, well, technically, yes, I could do it, but does it make me feel better about myself? No, because I will
And
feel overworked and I don't want that.
yeah, and it's not just like work is just an easy example, because a lot of times in today's world and in today's society,
Work is
bleeds
everything.
in. Yeah, work is everything. Work bleeds into your social life. It bleeds into your family life. It bleeds into your personal, like, little sanctuary life. Like, it just bleeds into everything.
Yeah.
And at least in the US, and I know Europe and European countries do have a slightly different lifestyle, and some of them are much better at differentiating work life and home slash personal life. But definitely in the US, it's not a thing. Your work goes with you everywhere, even on vacations. So I think it's so important for anyone who is listening or hearing this that is in that position where, your job seems to be bleeding over into a whole bunch of other areas of your life, to look at it critically and say, how much is in my job description to do, and how much am I just taking on?
Yeah.
Because you're only getting paid to do your job description. And I think a lot of people forget about that.
I think
Like,
so too.
my situation is very, very different, and it's very unique, and I will complain about it a lot until I get through it, because once I'm through it, it's going to feel a lot better. But even stepping back and looking at corporate world, or like more industry based, I think people forget their boss tells them to do something, or a coworker asks them to take over something, and they say yes because in their head, oh, it won't take me much time, or oh,
Or they feel like they have the obligation to do so.
yeah, or they have the obligation, or it will make me look good, or like it will help me get a promotion. Like, all of those things go through people's heads. But if it's taking away from relaxation time, from travel time, from family time, from anything else, home life, relationships, if it's taking away from that and
Or
it's
just
not,
being able to practice some hobbies.
yes, well, yeah, personal time, like all of that, like if it's taking away from that and it's not in your job description, it's okay to say no and do not do it.
Yeah. And saying no, probably to people who listen, it's the hardest thing for them to do. I feel like at least the type of people that we're targeting probably have difficulty saying no to things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also harder. You always hear, or I have heard actually quite frequently recently, that, oh, like, I'm in my 30s, or I'm in my 40s, or like, do you see my age? Like, do you know how old I am? I don't care about that anymore. Like, I don't care what people think about me.
Yeah.
In your early 20s, or in your mid 20s, you're still trying to make an impression and prove who you are. And so I think it is hard psychologically for us to say no, because if
Yeah.
we there is this negativity around saying no and putting limitations, it's going to make you look bad. And honestly, if it does, then there's probably a problem in the environment or in the situation that you are. As long as you are doing what you're supposed to be doing at a very good, I don't want to say criteria, but like if you're doing your job or if you're doing what you said you're going to do with good effort, good, what is the word I'm looking for? I don't remember. Quality. If you're doing good quality work and you're doing everything that you're supposed to be doing with that good quality, you should not have to take on extra if it is ruining outside.
And we now talk a lot about school and work. School and work are not the only things in life. School is good to be educated, to, be more knowledgeable about certain topics, and work is what we need to do to live. Sure. In the US, more so, the work life is your life. It's hard to, live in a country like that, I think. But the moments that you don't have work time, don't overdo yourself in those other moments. Because then your outside work time is going to feel also like a must. Like, I must do this. I have to do that. I have to do this. It's like the time that you're off of your job, go away from the job. Leave the job at where it is. Especially if, people who work in academia, again, it's a bit different because depending on what type of positions you are, but it's oftentimes taken home. But if you just have a simple 9 to 5 office job where you go in, you work 9 to 5, leave it at work. Do something else. Do something that you enjoy. If they don't pay you overtime, don't stay overtime if you don't have to. And unless they pay you, then stay overtime if you want, if you need. But if it's not in your job description that you will be paid overtime, don't stay overtime. Just go home. Nobody is requiring you to do so. I feel like people tend to do those types of things because it's like, well, I want to be a good person. I want to do the work that my boss is wanting me to do. And it's like, yes, of course, you want to do all these things, but also you want to live your life outside of your work. Your boss is doing the same thing. He goes home and has his home life, whatever. So I think it's really important to know a limitation also into when to separate your job from your personal life.
Yeah, for sure. That's probably the biggest personal limitation that should be set in today's world in society, especially like I said in the US for sure. It's just one of those things I just bleed over. I also think that there's smaller personal limitations and boundaries, but that can be set in elsewhere. Like you said, we talk a lot about school and work because a lot of us are coming out of school and going into work or whatever it might be, but
And it's just a big chunk of your day-to-day like
it
activity.
is, yeah, it is. But I also think it is important to talk that there's limitations in your social life. There's limitations in like your personal life outside of work or school. Like, you could be asked to go out on this kind of like go out to eat on this night and go out to eat on that night, or go come over for especially if football season's coming up, like Thursday night football or stuff like that, and you may do it out of obligation to your friend or your group of friends, or just because you mentioned it once, so maybe now you got to do it. I mean, a lot of those things come in, and at the end of the day, like if you get home and you're like, I really don't want to leave again, it's okay to set that as a limitation and be like, I would love to come over, but we're gonna have to do it another time.
Yeah.
Or, you know, I some people, especially in their early 20s, are not don't have the finances to go out all the time, whether it's out to eat or to a bar. Like things are
To see the
expensive.
movie, like whatever
Yeah,
it
see a
is.
movie, like things are expensive.
Yeah.
And if you are like, I'm not going to be able to comfortably buy groceries or pay bills if I go and spend $50 on food and alcohol to hang out with my friends
Yeah.
at a restaurant. That's
And
okay. If that's a personal limitation for you, it's okay to acknowledge that and don't keep stretching yourself thin.
and it might also be an idea, and if a situation like that occurs, to talk to your friends and be like, "Hey, I would love to hang out with you, but can we do it in a different way where we don't have to go out for dinner and have drinks, but we can just stay in and play some board games and maybe buy a bottle of wine, which saves you probably so much money."
Yeah, for sure. There's tons of free things. I think people there's like this conception, and I'm wondering now if it's starting to kind of go away. I don't know, but I know a few years ago there was kind of like this conception that to hang out with your friends, you had to be going out and doing something, most likely spending money.
I feel like it
And
still is, though.
is it still like a thing? I don't
I
know.
think so.
Like I
Yeah.
said, I'm kind of out of the loop, but I do know, like, just even a few years ago, that it was very much like that. But there's so many free things that you can do with your friends or
Yeah.
your friend or whatever, your family, that does not involve spending money. Like you said, like if you're gonna go watch a movie, chances are you're paying a subscription with movies. Just stay at home, go to a person's house, and watch the movie.
Yeah. And like you can
Everyone probably has a
spend,
kitchen. Everyone
yeah,
bring a dish. You have a meal for a fraction of the cost.
exactly. It's not necessarily about limiting yourself into not being able to do anything because you are on a budget or because you don't have the mental capacity. It's just figuring out what works for you within the limitations that you have set for yourself. Because, as we say, you can go to a restaurant and hang out with friends, but you can also make a home cooked meal and hang out with friends in a much more, homey environment where you don't have to be worrying about other people sitting next to you or whatever. It's more comfortable, probably. And that way, it's saving a little bit of money. And if you do that every week, instead of going out to dinner, you stay at home and make a dish, you probably save like 100 to 200 to maybe $300 a month just on food. And that money can go towards buying a house, saving up for buying a house. I don't know, whatever it is that you're saving money for, like that type of money can go towards that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's so many possibilities, and I think this whole episode really, we wanted to discuss one, the areas in which your limitations can be stretched. And like we talked a lot about school and work. We talked a lot about like social life. But the other part of it is that you can still enjoy life
Yeah.
within your set limitations. You do not have to stretch your limitations to enjoy
I
life.
think this also plays into relationships. I had a conversation with Georgia about this. It's like, why do men especially fear to get married? And we were kind of like, we feel like they have this idea of like, when I get married to a woman, she's expecting me to always be at home at 6 p.m. for dinner. And it's like as if we women are limiting our man to live their own life. So I believe that within relationships, it is also very important to know your limitations. A perfect example for me and Michael is yesterday, I was tired, I was in bed, and he said he would shower and then come up. But he was taking too damn long, and I wasn't going to wait for him. So I just went to sleep. But I know if that happened to me 3 years ago, I would have waited and waited and waited and waited until he came up, and I was like pissed because I was tired. So it's like when you know those types of limitations, it's okay to set them and follow them. And if you're in a healthy relationship, your partner respects those and isn't gonna try to force you to be different than what you truly want to do. So it goes to from work to friendships to relationships to even your relationship to yourself. It's if you have made these plans to go work out, or if you have made these plans to read a book, but you're just not really feeling good, or you're just tired, and you decide to do something different that energizes you more, it's okay. That's a limitation you set for yourself and you recognize it. And now you maybe know what to do next time to feel more energized.
Yeah, and especially speaking on relationship with self, I think relationship with your significant other, you're exactly right. There are these limitations that we each are going to have, and you, as a respectful significant other, you need to recognize them and be okay with them, and don't get annoyed with them or frustrated with them. Like that's who they are. It's what they need to be their best self.
Right. And
Whether
you
it's
would
what,
want them to also respect your needs.
yeah, yeah, exactly. In regards to like relationship with self, which is where I was going with this all along, and now I lost my train of thought.
I'm
Yes, I
sorry.
know. No, you're fine. Today with social media, you are always hearing, depending upon which side of social media you're on, but I think it's pretty much infiltrated every dimension. You're like, you constantly are bombarded with, you got to do this to be healthy, and you got to do this for your mental health, and you got to do this for your physical health, and you have to do this for your emotional. There's never ending carousel of things that you should be doing. Don't fall into the train or the trap that you have to do them all, because not all of them are going to work for you.
No.
And it is kind of like your job and your respect to yourself to figure out which ones work,
Yeah.
and that's a limitation. Your limitation is not that you do all these things, because not all those things are going to work for you, but pick the ones that do, try some, learn some, and then pick the ones that work best for you and just stick to those.
Like, yeah. No, I think, and that it's like full circle back to also what our purpose is with this podcast is that there are so many influencers out there trying to tell you what you need to do to live your best life. And it's like, well, their life is probably very different from yours. And you can't compare yourself to them. You can only compare yourself to the person you were yesterday, 2 days ago, 3 years ago, 5 months ago. Like you can only compare yourself to you. And if there are things worse now than before, think about okay, what happened that right now this area of my life is not as good. It's all about self evaluation. And by self evaluating, you will figure out more and more what's limiting you and where you need to draw the line for
Yeah,
yourself.
exactly. And I think that's a really good kind of wrap up kind of topic, because it is
Yeah.
so true. Everyone's life is different. So what works for someone, what someone else's limits are not going to be yours. Don't put the pressure on yourself to emulate or compare your,
You're good.
really like messing with, is it
Yeah, now I can see you again.
okay, I don't know what's going on. But just remember, your life, it's going to be your limitations. And kind of like the last thing I wanted to say is your limitations are going to change based on where you are in life. So, what your limitations were 5 years ago, 5 months ago, 3 weeks ago, 2 days ago, yesterday, are not going to be the same as what they are now and what they will be in the future. So, to Mara's point, you have to continuously self evaluate to understand what your new limitations are.
Yeah. And I will give one example from myself to kind of put it in perspective. The other day, I went for a run and I did a 3 kilometers. So that's like a 2.1 miles, something like that. Um, and I kind of felt down because it wasn't as good. But then I talked to Michael and I said, well, I can't really be upset at myself because last week I couldn't even run the full thing. And now I ran the whole thing. And if I look back 3 months ago, I couldn't even run a full mile. So it's like I might not have felt good at the moment, but I definitely am better than I was a few months ago when it comes to running. And it's like I can compare myself to other people that have ran for years and years and years and are running these crazy times. But that wouldn't be fair to me because that would be putting expectations on myself that at this point in my career I won't even match. And that counts for everything that you do in your life, whether it's school, work, relationships, friendships, whatever it may be. Compare yourself to who you were before. And I think we should leave it at that.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think we did a very good job summing up and kind of discussing what we came here to discuss. So, with that, if you guys have any insights or if you guys want us to talk about a certain topic or give our opinion on a certain topic, because again, this is all opinion and it's all based on our life and our life experiences. We hope that someone can get something from it. But if there's something you would like for us to just discuss, to hear our opinions of, please let us know. Otherwise, we will see you all or talk to you all next week. And Mart and I want to thank you for joining us as we offer a glimpse into the world of true friendship, where even though worlds may seem apart, the connections remain strong.
Thank you.